Welcome to The Frontier. The Frontier is an exploration of the post-COVID-19 consumer products landscape through the minds of the pioneers of the industry. Like all industries, the consumer products space is experiencing a massive shockwave as a result of COVID-19, and we created the Frontier video interview series to listen to and document for the broader community the perspectives from the field during this extraordinary time in history. My name is William Hood, and together with my co-founder, Jill Steib, we hope you will both enjoy and value the Frontier. This afternoon, Jill and I are very privileged to have been invited round by Tim Brown of Allbirds for a socially distanced discussion on his new front porch. Tim, thanks so much for having us round this afternoon.
Thanks for coming. You're like the first visitors we've ever had.
The first visitors really? Since COVID began?
We feel very special.
We moved in yesterday, but anyway, it's good to have you.
Congrats on the new house.
Yeah, thank you.
Tim, you don't know this, but you have more in common with my two older teenage boys than I do. They are passionate about soccer. We call it football, and they love Allbirds. They don't call them Allbirds. They say, "Dad, you look great. You're wearing your birds." And they make me feel very cool. Tim, tell us about that journey from being a professional soccer player in New Zealand to being the co-founder of what has become a household brand in shoes.
There's a long story short. I had a career playing football or soccer, depending on where you came from, back in New Zealand, playing in the Australian Professional League. Was fortunate to go to the World Cup in 2010 with New Zealand, had this amazing journey, and realised I didn't want to be the last guy at the party, so retired. Went off to business school in London, all while kind of like playing with this idea for a shoe made of wool, which is just an odd idea that I literally chipped away at for nearly 5 years. And in 2013, found myself at business school at Northwestern, just outside of Chicago, and a professor called Carter Cast. I took an entrepreneurship class where he forced me to get serious about this as an idea. And he thought it was a bad one, but he encouraged me to launch it on Kickstarter, which I did in early 2014, and it kind of took off. And that was the beginning of my post-sport journey, was to create a footwear brand. I don't want to say it was accidental, because I worked at it for a long time, but I never imagined that it would become the business that it is today. But there's a lot of steps in between. That's the fast story. But now Allbirds has got offices in 4 countries, employs just nearly 500 people, and is really, really committed to the idea of using sustainable materials in a category that is traditionally overlooked at. So really, really exciting moment in that journey.
And speaking of sustainability, there was a big announcement today, May 28th, as it relates to a partnership with Adidas. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Very big one. I mean, to work with one of the great global storied brands to create over the next year the lowest carbon shoe that we possibly can, what we believe will be the lowest carbon shoe in the world, is really exciting. And going back to my previous life, I was an Adidas athlete, so I've been a fan of the brand. And I think what a lot of people don't know is they're an enormous organization that is trying very, very hard to create a more sustainable organization. And so to partner with them, is really quite unusual. Traditionally in the footwear space, you create materials, you make up names for them, and then you keep them very secret. We're doing something really different. We're sharing everything, bringing our portfolio of material innovations together. And we're going to try and create something that really, really accelerates the journey towards net zero products and products that have lower carbon impact. So it's a really, really big day for us today.
That's great, Tim. Tim, when you were starting off the business, did you have a plan that Allbirds would be a direct-to-consumer or DTC business, or was the plan always to build an omni-channel business?
It was sort of there's 3 pillars of our brand, and they kind of track 3 insights. The first one was a design insight. So when I was sponsored by the big sportswear companies, I used to get lots of products and had lots of logos, and they were overdone and they changed all the time. So the first sort of beginning of this whole journey was, could you create a footwear product that was simple and was unvarnished? it became about materials when I realized that the footwear industry defaulted to making shoes really cheaply, and I literally knew nothing about it. I visited a footwear factory in one of my off seasons that I found on Google, and I realized that shoes are cheaply made out of cheap materials, and there was a prevailing low-cost mentality. And then the third one came when I met my co-founder, Joey, based in San Francisco, with the idea that there was an opportunity from a design point of view, an opportunity to use different sort of materials, but a much larger challenge to tackle as well, and that was sustainability. Right. The fashion industry is 10% of global emissions. The footwear industry makes 20 billion pairs of shoes a year, and they don't make them very thoughtfully. In fact, they've been paying lip service to the idea of sustainability. So could we build a brand that tackled that problem? And one of the ways that we realized we could was by making it vertical, by making it direct to the customer so that we could get lots of feedback, move quickly, be fast, be responsive, but also where we could keep the margin room that was traditionally given to a middleman to really invest in different types of materials that the footwear industry basically couldn't afford. And that's been the game plan. And we're a little over 4 years into it, and it's caught the attention of some really big brands. So we're making some progress.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations. So sustainability is core to the mission of Allbirds.
Yeah, I mean, neither Joey and I came from the footwear industry. Our first shoe was made up out of wool, and I come from New Zealand, but I didn't grow up on a sheep farm. I have empathy for that industry, but that wasn't what this was about. I think this became real when we realized there was a problem that really someone needed to tackle. And this was a challenge that wasn't just ours or the footwear industry's, it was the whole world's. That we have a global carbon footprint that we need to reduce, and there was a real opportunity to try and do things differently and really go after that. And so Joey and I got together and actually wrote a story of 10 years in the future that we still share with every employee that interviews at Allbirds, that imagined we'd build a business we'd tell our grandkids about that would really, was a part of showing people that there was a way to, to stop using the term sustainability, as confusing as that has got, because everything that we were doing was sustainable. And that's kind of been the goal, and we're not there yet, but we're making some progress.
That's fantastic.
And Tim, it seems like years ago now that you and I were at a dinner party in Kentfield, California together, not socially distancing.
No.
And the world has truly shifted since that time that we were last together. And I'd love to hear more about where you were and what you were doing when you realized that COVID-19 was going to change the way we operate.
So we'd launched in China about a year or so ago. So we got an office on the ground. So we got a really early read on this. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw obviously the ferocity of this thing taking over. And we knew it was going to be a problem, but I just don't think, like most people, we thought it was going to become the pandemic that it has become. But, the business was severely curtailed in China. Retail stores didn't actually shut down, but the business sort of fell off a cliff. And we sort of saw that happening. And so it was a preview into sort of the cycle, because what also happened is that China came out of it and started to return to pre-COVID levels. So we've understood that there was going to be a lifespan of this, but I think when it came to America, it took us all by surprise, how quickly it happened. And I think we were discussing it, and then all of a sudden the tech companies started to shut their offices down. They went first, and we were really sort of, do we shut our offices down? Because then you're hurting. Yes, we can do that, but then there's the cleaners, there's the cafes, there's an economic responsibility. Once you leave our neighborhood, you retreat like that. So we were really conscious of the two sides of this, which is obviously the health and well-being of the individuals, the safety of people, but also the economic impact of sort of withdrawing. But I remember going home one day, watching TV one evening, and I saw that the NBA had cancelled. Mm-hmm. And I knew that this was different. And, there's so many reports, so many media, people speculating, but when the NBA shuts down, and we moved very quickly, I think our offices were shut the next day, and straight away it was like, what do we do with our retail stores? And that became the next question.
Tim, that's a really encouraging message, though, that you are seeing sales return in China. It's a message to all the entrepreneurs and this consumer products industry that this thing will come, it will go, and if there was weak demand, it's going to return, which is great. I was thinking the other day of, for me, the best example of leadership through COVID, and I have to say it's Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, where you grew up. Just the way she's led with empathy, with strength, and her country has followed and rallied behind her, and they've had a hugely successful being able to slow down the spread of COVID, and I think actually banish it from the island. How have you led your business through COVID-19, and how would you say your employees will remember you as a leader?
Oh, I mean, I think the jury's still out on that, but I mean, I think you did raise a great point. Jacinda, for a model of empathetic leadership, I think, is a great one. Through the Christchurch mass shooting to this particular situation, I think she's got up and shown people she's my age, she's 38, 39.
Unreal.
She's got up and been tough on certain things, but even guns, she turned around and banned those within weeks of that happening. And I think she's been so empathetic and done a great job. But look, it's easy for New Zealand in some ways, and I think to draw a bow between the complexity of America and is difficult. But certainly from afar, I've been a proud Kiwi to see how people have adopted that. And one thing that I think they did really well, and of course it's easier for them, it's a country that's smaller than the Bay Area in population, very clear set of levels. And we've tried to actually sort of adopt that internally with a rating system and a level system for our employees to sort of slowly make it clear where we are now. This is, we're at level 1, we're socially distancing, this is bad, but as we proceed back to level 2, small percentage of people within the workforce who really, really need to be there are going to need to go into the office, and we're slowly going to open some retail stores, and then level 3, and so on and so forth, and try and articulate a really clear set of stages is sort of something we've taken from that experience. But look, it's difficult. Have we done it well? I don't know. I guess this is what happened. We made the decision about the same time that Apple did to close our stores down. It was 14 of our 18 retail stores, not including China, shut down. And our Australia and New Zealand e-commerce businesses were completely lights out. And it was tough. What's going to happen? The world's falling apart. And very early on, we made the decision that we were going to guarantee that there would be not a single layoff through to the end of July for our entire retail staff, and that we were going to commit to that. We'd prepared well as a business, I think for a rainy day, and we were going to use some of that to make sure our team was together. It was a really important sort of plant the flag moment. We're going to fight here, but we're going to do it together. And I'm really proud of that reaction. And I think that set the foundation for everything that happened afterwards. And straight away, our team went into gear. We donated, $1 million worth of shoes to healthcare workers on the front lines. Happened really quickly.
Wonderful.
Saw an amazing response to our community. And I think more broadly, we've seen the businesses that have led with purpose, that have led with their societal responsibility, winning through this moment. And that's what we tried to do, and that was a great reaction. And we've really come out of this really well. We're not going to grow in the way that we were before, but we're still going to grow. For the first time, we're losing money since we started the business, which is never a nice place to be. But this might, with everything we've achieved in a rapid period of growth, from 2 people working out of their mother-in-law's house to a team of nearly 500 people, this might be our best year yet. And so I'm incredibly proud. And the Adidas partnership, the recent release of our performance shoe, and our carbon numbering system, which I'm happy to share, are all pretty significant things that we just sort of, as a team with a new working environment, kind of delivered. And I'm really, really proud and pleased with where we sit right now.
That's extraordinary, Tim. What's coming across to me is that all of your employees are playing a role in Allbirds surviving and ultimately thriving this year through COVID-19. Do you believe you guys have built a culture that makes everybody in a way feel like they're part of that mission of Allbirds?
It's deposits and withdrawals, right? I would like to think we've invested a lot in building our culture, communicating what it means to work at Allbirds, generally trying, not always succeeding, but generally trying to do the right thing by the people that sacrifice to work for us. And then equally it turns around and there's a situation where you need to ask people to dig deep, and they do. I've been really, really proud. And I'd like to think it's because, we've done right by people before, and that has been, we've just seen this incredible reaction. So all in all, we're really, really proud with how things have gone.
And you're personally juggling a lot at home. You have 2 little ones here with your wife. How are you and your family doing during this time?
I'm conscious there's a lot of people that never got the chance to work at home. I'm conscious that there's a lot of people that have lost their job, like an extraordinary amount.
Yes.
So you take none of that for granted. And then you equally know, as great as it's been to work at home, you're juggling, you're running away. Like Linz and I have been doing work calls from the bathroom, muting a call to wipe a bum. So it's not without its challenges, and but it could be a lot worse. So we're all good and coming through it, and quite honestly, I think there's a really interesting question of what happens next. This idea of returning to normal misses the larger opportunity to return to something better, and that's easy to say if than if you're one of the millions of people that are unemployed. So put that to one side. I think as an organisation, we've certainly, somewhere along the way, and I think it was about 5 or 6 weeks in, we gave ourselves permission to pick our heads up and imagine the possibilities that came out of this. We were inspired actually by a piece of history. 1941, FDR and Winston Churchill came together before America had even entered the war in the depths of this crisis to imagine the United Nations. And we're like, wow, that's really interesting. And it was like a historical permission to go and say, okay, we're grinding. Okay, there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay, we don't know how this is going to happen, and it's really tough. But let's get together and imagine in 2 years, if we do everything right, what have we learned from the situation? And what are the opportunities? And we got our leadership team together, and we, again, much like we did at the founding of the company, we wrote a story. And it was 2 pages, and it articulated the idea that while people miss a lot of the office, they've also loved the flexibility and the family time and the lack of commuting. While traditionally you always had to fly to factories to make products, there's actually an extraordinary efficiency in digital tools and product making, and how could we build those in an accelerated way? All of these types of things, and we shaped it into a document that we're in the process of sharing with the company. And that was a really good moment. But it was permission to sort of take yourself back from the coalface and imagine. And it's been one of the best things we've done. Do it too early, and it's the wrong thing to do. Do it too late, and you miss the chance to sort of see in any sort of situation, good or bad, the opportunities for doing it better. And that's what we've tried to do. And I think it's been probably one of the most powerful things coming out of this for us.
I think that's a really good message to the community and to other entrepreneurs, which is obviously take care of your family, your community, and your employees and business continuity, but at the right time, look to the future and see how things will change and position yourself for that. And what about the consumer, Tim? Do you believe there'll be an acceleration of consumer demand for certain products? Will mission-driven brands become more of a priority?
Look, I think it's clear that there was already pre-COVID the Business Roundtable announcement, this transformation of the idea of the role of business in society. That was already happening. Allbirds, I think from the beginning, I don't want to say we saw that early, but B Corp, our environmental mission, it was always central to the business, not because we're good guys, but because we believe that there was an opportunity to go further when you combine the idea of purpose and profit, that you could actually influence the conversation around sustainability, not if you led with a heart, but if you made it a head-based financial one in many cases. So that's what's sort of happening with our conversation around carbon. But I think on a consumer level, what we're seeing in this moment is, one, if we needed reminding, it's a global community. COVID has not respected traditional borders, and it's been imperfect and not completely seamless, but for the most part, I think you've seen people working together in pretty amazing ways. And as we look forward to probably the next crisis looming around climate change, I think that gives you a lot of hope, actually more hope than you had before this whole thing went down. And I think on top of that, you've seen Mother Nature kind of fighting back, coyotes on the Golden Gate Bridge, bald eagles in Central Park, and I think less pollution.
Kangaroos in Canberra.
Kangaroos in Canberra. I think they were there already.
They were.
Yeah. Greater air clarity and purity in major cities around the world because people aren't commuting, and a reduction of 8% of estimated 8% or something of global carbon emissions this year. Maybe this thing that was seemingly intractable, impossible, maybe we can actually impact it. And so, I think you've also seen on the consumer level this connection to the idea of the health and well-being of the individual never been more important. I'm very appreciative that I'm healthy, but connecting that idea to the health and well-being of the planet, those two things are connected and fundamentally related. And so I think as it relates to our mission, this idea that we have a global carbon footprint that we need to reduce, we need to find ways of living with net zero impact. I think you look at it and you had maybe more hope now than you did 2 months ago, and that's a pretty amazing thing to be able to say. What we do with it, TBD.
I love that connectivity between our health. Clearly, health and wellness has become the number one consumer priority, but connecting our health to the health of the planet. That's great. I love that.
You touched on it earlier, but I'm curious how you think about collaboration with your team going forward and the role of the office and a new way of working, or incorporating some of the aspects that we learned during COVID into the future, and how you're starting to think about that.
We are, and we're just starting to think about it, and we don't have all the answers. And, there's articles floating around the office is dead. I don't think that's true. But I equally don't think that we can leave the flexibility and the autonomy that we've been given to work in the ways that we want. Particularly as a parent, that you're not, this idea of a kind of a 9 to 6 workday is an anachronism. And we haven't been working like that anyway. And the idea that that's still how life is structured sort of feels wrong. That being said, I think the creativity of people being together, there's a transactional nature to video calls that at the beginning was actually quite refreshing. And early on, you realize there's a whole lack of sort of like inputs that you're missing as a human being to kind of read the situation. You've lost your feel for how someone truly is. And so the office and the role of that as a hub for creativity and productivity feels more important than ever. And the relationships that we're drawing on now were built in person. They're not going to be built over Zoom. The very conversation that kicked off the partnership with Adidas was when one of their board members and senior executives came to our office and commented on the atmosphere and the feeling of a group of people moving in one direction, and we decided to do something together. That doesn't happen on a video call, but I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too. And I think what we're imagining is that there's a way to do that, and the short answer is there is. I'm sure of it, and it's just going to take some creative thought, and it'll be different for every organization. And I think it's premature, and some companies have done this, to sort of say you work from home forever. I think that's a knee-jerk reaction to a situation that's far more nuanced.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there may be more balance going forward, but you cannot take the social element out of business. It's so critical to the way business has always been done.
And mentorship as well. It's hard to start in a new company and never have that connectivity with your team, or to be able to lead in the way that you're used to.
And and the hallway conversation that sparks something that's 5 times out of 10 annoying, and 5 times out of 10, sits with you and leads to something new. And I think it'll be really interesting. And I think what we're determined to do, this situation is an opportunity to revisit these things, to relook at the conversation around the environment, to reset a bunch of targets. So just don't let it go to waste.
Yeah, don't waste a crisis.
Don't let a good crisis go to waste. And there's a timing to that. If you wait too long, we'll revert back to doing all the things that we were doing with the same level of frustrations. So I think it's really important as a society, maybe, that we don't.
Tim, we're coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else you would personally like to share with the broader consumer products business community in these trying times?
I don't know if we're in a particular position to offer advice or anything, but what I would sort of say is, on the conversation around the sustainability, at Allbirds at least, we've got and it's the basis of this Adidas partnership, a developing clarity 4 years in on that conversation. And, I think the word sustainability that I've mentioned a few times is confusing. It means kind of 10 things to 10 different people. It's about air quality and recyclability and biodiversity, and all of these things that oftentimes have competing objectives. So I think as business leaders and, even as people, as individuals, as citizens, it's confusing as to where to start with that. And I think where we've landed as an organization is that carbon is the singular scorecard. It's the unifying metric that connects the fashion industry with the investment banking industry, New Zealand with America, that we all have to sort of buy into. So I would sort of say, if you'd indulge me in a little bit of advice, if you're an employee or a leader of a company that is not currently measuring their carbon and innovating to drive that down to zero, and in the meantime using offsets as a legitimate, certifies offsets as a legitimate way to neutralize your environmental impact, you are on the wrong side of history. And you should be doing that. And it's not exactly simple at the moment, but it is doable and possible. And I think all of a sudden then you're bridging the head and the heart. Everyone knows there's a problem, but all of a sudden you're managing an expense, a carbon cost that you are paying to offset, that you're managing like any other line item on your business. And the businesses that are doing this, that are preparing for a future for a cost of carbon, are the ones that are going to win in the long run. And so my guidance would be, if you're not doing that, start.
Tim, that's a very powerful message and great advice. You truly are a pioneer. Thank you for being on the frontier with us today.
Appreciate it. Frontier in Sonoma. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. That was great. I loved it.
Good.
Well done.